All right, so we're taking a look at your new packet right now and getting started here. We're just going to take a look at some of the basics here in your inequalities unit. And we're just going to kind of dive right on in here with the definition of an inequality. So an inequality is when we're comparing one expression to another, all right? So if I asked you guys to compare 6 and 5, since they're not equal, obviously 6 is bigger, all right? Now if I put a plus 1 over here, then I could also now put the or equals to, because 6 does in fact equal 6. So that's the difference when you see that little symbol. So our inequality symbols that we're going to review now are going to be the less than, it could be less than or equal to, and it could be greater than, and it could be greater than or equal to. We're going to be reviewing in this video that there is an open circle for problems like this, but with the or equal to, it is a closed circle, okay? So if you're graphing the solution n is greater than 4 on a number line, you've got your 4 right here. You just build the number line around it. And why is there an open circle here? Because it's just n is greater than 4. All right. Now, one of the intentions of this video is to teach you guys about something called interval notation. Interval notation. And I'm going to go ahead and get it started here with the very first one. What we're saying here is that x could be 4, I should say n, or it could be anything bigger, so up through positive infinity. So these things are going to look kind of like ordered pairs, and throughout the video I'm going to explain when you use parentheses around them versus when you might use a bracket, okay? And at the bottom of this page we're going to kind of summarize everything. So since it could not equal the 4, it's parentheses, and you can never equal infinity, so the infinity symbol will always get parentheses. Don't worry if you're struggling a little bit right now with this piece of it, with the interval notation. That's going to be something that we continue to show and review throughout the video. All right, now we're going to take a look at the next one. Okay, we've got that n is less than 4. So since n is less than 4, this time we're going to have an open circle, but we're shading in this direction. All right. Now, another thing I want to point out is that I'll notice that some students, they'll put a circle up here and then draw a line above the number line. We don't want to do that. We actually want, our whole goal here is to be shading the solutions actually on the number line. All right, you want to actually be shading the solutions on the number line. So for interval notation with this one, it's a little bit different because we're shading back to the left. So the 4 is now the bigger number, and we're shading everything back in towards negative infinity. Now, once again, because you cannot equal infinity, that side's always going to get parentheses. Infinity always gets a parentheses. And because it's not or equal to, this 4 is going to also get parentheses. Now let's take a look at the next one here. We have that n is greater than or equal to 4. That's now this translation. N is greater than or equal to 4. So it's the same as the first one. You'll notice it's literally the exact same. Except the only thing is that now we're coloring in this circle. So why is there a closed circle? It's because of this little line right here, and that's the part that means or equal to. Oops. Okay, so if you see the or equal to, that's when you know you're going to have a closed circle. Okay. Now let's review the interval notation with this one. So we're saying if n is everything bigger than or equal to the 4, so here's your 4. We shaded up to the right, positive infinity. Again, you can never equal infinity. And over here, since it is or equal to, that's when you get the bracket, okay? So the lines here of the bracket, to me, are kind of like the coloring in part over here. That's the extra little thing for the or equal to. All right, and now for the last one, we've got that n is less than or equal to 4. So here's your 4. Because of the or equal to, it's a closed circle, and less than we're going to shade this way. So in interval notation, you had your 4, then you shaded back this way to the left. You can never equal infinity. It's just the idea that the numbers keep going on forever and ever and ever. And then you can equal 4 in this case, so there's the bracket, okay? So down here, what we have is our hints for the graphing. If you see the or equals to with the little lines up underneath it, that's when you know you're going to have a dark, closed, colored in circle. If it's like this, it would be an open, not colored in circle. And what we see here for the or equal to, if it is colored in and it could equal that number, you'd be using a bracket depending on which side it is. And if it is just greater than or less than, you'll be using the parentheses, okay? So now let's flip over and continue to develop our sense of how to write this in interval notation. We're also going to just be reviewing here how to add and subtract your inequalities. All right, so now we're on page 2. And one big thing I do want to point out here is that you want to make sure your answer has an inequality symbol right now. We're fresh out of our equations unit, so you want to just remember not to put an equal sign. We're using the inequality symbols, okay? But that being said, solving an inequality is very similar to solving an equation. It's pretty much the exact same thing. So like for this very first example, if you saw 9 plus n is greater than 11, you would subtract 9 on both sides, and you'd get that n is greater than 2. So if n is bigger than 2, what that means is 2 is a minimum, okay? Because n can be anything bigger than 2. Now to check, what I'm doing is I'm just picking the next number higher than 2, so 3, and I'm just plugging it in, 9 plus 3, and notice that since I get a 12, it is bigger than the 11, so that works as a solution. And now let's practice the interval notation. So if you were to sketch this on a number line, you'd have 2 right in the middle, and then here would be 3, and here would be 1. So since it's greater than 2, you'd have an open circle, and you'd shade this way. So kind of like your ordered pair looking thing, the 2 comes first, we shaded to the right this way, you can never equal infinity, and since it was just greater than 2, it couldn't equal it, that's why I got a parentheses right here. Now is probably a good time for me to explain why we care about this thing called interval notation, okay? Take a look at the next problem. Now the thing that stinks about the next problem is that when the variable is over here, and you get that 3 is greater than n, our brain doesn't like thinking about it when the 3 comes first. So what a lot of students will do here is that they'll actually just take the time to rewrite it and say, okay, so that's the same as me saying n is less than 3. And then what can happen is that some of you are going to have this on your paper, and some of you are going to have this on your paper, and you're going to wonder who is right. So that's why it doesn't matter which way you write your answer, we'll all agree on interval notation. So when shading this thing, if n is less than 3, let's take a look at the number line. If n is less than 3, here's 3. Here would be a 4. Here would be a 2. So you've got an open circle on 3, and we'd be shading less than. Now notice it says the same thing right here. 3 is bigger than n, so 3 is bigger than all this stuff that I'm shading. So because it can look more than one way when you write your answer, we all want interval notation. So I'll help you with the interval notation here. We had 3, but this time we went back when we shaded. You can never equal infinity. And since it wasn't or equal to, this one was a parentheses, okay? So if you're going to be shading this way on the number line, you have a negative infinity over here. If you're shading to the right, you have a positive infinity, okay? All right. Now for the next one, if we have that negative 1 is less than or equal to m plus 2, you're just going to subtract 2 on both sides. That cancels out. And then you've got here negative 3 is less than or equal to m. Once again, when graphing that, it's like, ugh, my brain doesn't like to think about it with the number first. So again, in purple, I'll show that what a lot of people here will do is just rewrite it to say, okay, so m has to be greater than or equal to the negative 3. And a lot of students will leave their answer like that, and then they'll see this in the key, and they're like, oh crap, am I right? So on a number line, what both would show here, if you have your negative 3, and then a negative 2 here, and then a negative 4 this way, if m is bigger than or equal to, we're going to color in our circle, and now we're going to shade this way. So here it is in interval notation. You got your negative 3. We shaded up this way to the right, and we're heading into the positives and heading up towards infinity. You can never equal infinity, but this time because we shaded in the circle, this one gets the bracket. So there's your bracket with the negative 3, and then you shaded up to the right, so the infinity is on this side. And for the last one here, when you solve this, you're going to add 6 to both sides, and we get that p is less than or equal to negative 2. So on your number line here, here's your negative 2. Here would be negative 1. 0 is, of course, here. This would be negative 3. So you've got your circle on negative 2, and it's closed. And this time we're going to shade this way for less than. So here's your interval notation in blue. You got your negative 2, and you shaded back this way. You're getting further into the negatives. You can never equal infinity. But over here, because this was colored in, this gets the bracket. So the parentheses is how you know if it's not equal to. The bracket is how you know if it is the or equals to part. Okay? So now let's take a look here at this number line. What we have is a number line. Let me just erase all this stuff for you guys and leave. There we go. All right, so we have a number line, and what the number line is showing is a solution here. And since we're going to the right, we're clearly showing that x is everything bigger than or equal to this negative 2. In interval notation, we have a negative 2. We're shading up towards the positives. You can never equal infinity, and since it was colored in, we get a bracket. So now we need to pick between A, B, C, and D, which one of these inequalities is the one that has this solution. Now notice, because this circle is colored in, I can actually knock out answer choice A. It would not get colored in. All right, now here, if I solve for B by subtracting 7 and subtracting 7, we get that C would be greater than or equal to negative 2. That already is going to be our answer. Now, real quick, I just want to point out here that when you solve for C, you're going to get R is less than or equal to negative 2, which means that would get shaded the other way. And for answer choice D here, you'd add 5 and add 5. And here this cancels out, and we get V is greater than or equal to negative 2. So here we can see that actually both of these would be the inequality that matches. And that takes care of the video on pages 1 and 2. Thank you.